Chuck Swindoll calls them postcard epistles. These are what we have as one chapter letters in the newer of the two testaments, like Second John, Third John, Jude, Philemon, and to a degree even Titus, 3-chapter book. They're shorter. They're well, we're finishing up one of the postcards, Second John, and I don't think there's enough to fill even 15 minutes. In the last, what we have as the last verse, John's last word in this letter, it's in verse 13. The children of your sister, who is chosen by God, send you their greetings. All right, who in the world would these children and their sister be? Well, we have a couple of alternatives. One is it's a specific woman with a name, and an identity, and her family, her siblings, or, which I think this is the more likely, this is carrying on one of the symbolic themes. It's kind of the code name that he used. In verse 1, he writes, to the lady chosen by God and to her children. Well, okay, the children of your sister. I think it was a church. Which church? We don't know. John doesn't, he doesn't go there. He's not explicit in this. I wonder why. Well, I think part of the reason is, as best we can estimate, this letter was written around AD 80, which was a time of persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire. Now, tradition and scholarship kind of give us a sense that John, in his later years, which again, the scholarship is pretty clear that this was in his last decade of his life that he writes this, and during that time, he was, according to tradition and history, was located in Ephesus. I talked about this last time, that you could visit the ruins of Ephesus, which is actually it's kind of on my bucket list. But one of the things on my bucket list, I don't know that it will ever happen, but that's okay. That's what bucket lists are for. Is well, it probably would wind up being a cruise, but I would love to visit these sites of Paul's missionary journey around that crescent of the Mediterranean, where Paul, Silas, Barnabas, Luke, Timothy, Titus traveled with him as he established churches in the first century. You can go to Ephesus and see the ruins, and they are, from all the pictures that I've seen and the firsthand accounts of friends who have been, it's incredibly impressive. Today, if you can't get to the actual ruins of Ephesus, there are 3 museum exhibits of Ephesus that are considered the best, most thorough. One is at the Vatican. The Catholic Church acquired tons and tons and tons, literal tons, of ruins and relics from Ephesus. The second one is the British Museum. They also have an extensive exhibit. And the third is in Vienna, Austria, in the Museum of History, Natural History. I've been to the museum in Vienna, and I've seen the exhibit. It's very impressive, and it gives us, I kind of got a feeling of what Ephesus was like. We went to the British Museum, but wouldn't you know it, while we were there, the Ephesus exhibit was closed down for renovation and cleaning. So I didn't get to see it. That was kind of disappointing, but the rest of the museum was pretty cool. And I mean, gosh, I have to be honest with you and let you know, I can see a museum in record time. I don't read everything on the wall, and everything in there doesn't trip my trigger, and on and on and on. Now, my wife, Debbie, man, she loves to just read everything that's listed about all the various pieces. And I suppose I probably am ADD. I do have attention span difficulties, so, and it shows up when I visit museums. Okay, all right, beside the point. Ephesus was a city of significance in John's day. It was a center of Greco-Roman culture, although it was located in what is now Turkey and the Turkish province, even in John's day. It was culturally Greco-Roman, this interesting blending of Grecian and Roman culture. It was at a crossroads for trade. It was the theater, and it wasn't a Colosseum in the sense that the Colosseum in Rome was, but it was a huge theater with a very large amount of seating that was used often by the Ephesians. One of the things to remember about the Ephesians is that they considered themselves the keepers of a religion, the religion of Diana, of the Romans called her Venus. Paul had established a church there. You read about this in the book of Acts. And he and Barnabas were pretty effective in their teaching and preaching, and lots of people joined them. But there was a fortune teller slave girl who made a significant amount of money for her masters by her fortune telling. Followed Paul and Barnabas, you probably remember this story, and would call out to them, these men are prophets of God, which sounds kind of like boy, that'd be kind of nice to have somebody else explain what I'm up to and what it became very annoying and distracting. And Paul turned around and he knew that she was possessed of a demon. He cast the demon out of her. And when he did this, her ability to foretell the future was gone. Well, guess what else was gone? You got it. The income from her fortune telling. And so her masters began to stir up the silversmiths because they made their living by manufacturing and selling idols of various sizes of Aphrodites, of Diana. If you ever look for in some kind of Bible encyclopedia, especially an illustrated one, you'll see that these idols are grotesque in a way. They are a many-breasted, obviously feminine figure. The tradition is, the story goes, that she fell from the skies. A lot of scientists and scholars believe that this was a meteor that fell on in around Ephesus, and a falling meteor in a very superstitious culture was not just an astronomical event. This was a message from the gods, and they believed that a god had descended to them. She was a goddess of fertility. She was a goddess of beauty, and she was a goddess that was worshipped with prostitution and offerings and other things that virtually all the gods and goddesses of the Greco-Roman world were worshipped with. Well, this slave girl's master stirred the crowd up to the extent they filled that theater that I told you about, and they chanted for 2 hours, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians." See, these guys, the masters of this slave girl, must have, they must have had pretty good emotional intelligence to be able to push all the motivational buttons to get that many people that stirred up, that cranked up about what Paul and Barnabas had done. It was almost a riot. It would have become a riot had someone with a clear mind finally had not gotten their attention and said, "We're in trouble for creating problems here. Cool it down, go home. There are courts and they're in session. They can take care of disagreements." So the church apparently thrived. However, I think this is true of any congregation. Just that at one point in history you thrived does not ensure that for all of time you're going to thrive. Read the book of Revelation. Ephesus is one of the 7 churches addressed there by letters from Jesus himself. And one of the things that Jesus says to the Ephesians is, "Come back to your first love." In other words, it's no stretch at all to realize that what John wrote, these words of Jesus, this message to the church at Ephesus was, you've drifted. There has been mission drift. And now your first love, Christ himself, his teaching had been somehow, it had become less important than who knows what else will. We have an idea that one of the things what would have been Gnosticism. And there were many other things. I think we can conjecture all day long about what the other things might have been. I just know that human nature is, when Jesus is not central in a person's life, something else will be. That's what happened in Ephesus. The children of your sister who is chosen by God send their greetings. Last thing. It's sometimes easy to forget that God's family, the church, extends from sunrise to sunset. There are places on the planet where people have never heard about Jesus. They are still in darkness. But the church has been and continues to make gains and advances. In America, we often don't hear about those international gains and advances, but the church is growing in the world against all kinds of opposition, and it's bigger than you imagine it to be. It's under persecution. That's where I'll end, saying we need to pray for the safety, the protection. God's care is in place. We need to cry out to him for our brothers and sisters, these children of our other sister, chosen by God just as we are in their circumstances. There's an organization you may want to connect with. You can do this on the internet easily if you type in Voice of the Martyrs. They track the persecution of the church worldwide, and it's appalling. But it's mainly concealed from Americans. The press doesn't cover it because it's not important and it won't sell papers or advertising. But it's happening all the time, and maybe this is just a good reminder to pray for our persecuted brothers and sisters across the globe. Well, I'm done. I've gone over time on what I thought I wasn't going to even have time to fill. We'll pick up 3 John, this third letter, next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.